when you focus on just, if reality is made up of 5 or 6 different things and you only focus on 1 or 2 and you ignore the rest and you make that 1 or 2 everything, well, clearly you're going to have a very distorted view, right? It's like I say, okay, science, people believe in science in the modern world. So we have physics, we have chemistry, we have biology, for example. What if I just come and say, I'm going to accept physics and chemistry, but I'm just going to ignore biology. Like, I'm just going to ignore it. I'm not going to take anything. Someone say, well, you're going to have a very distorted view. Or I believe in biology and chemistry, but I don't believe in physics. You're like, well, you can't do that. Like, they're all integrated. They're all talking about different aspects of the same reality, like physical reality, or trying to, right? And you have to look at all of them together and kind of piece it all together. And if you just arbitrarily exclude one of them, you're going to have a very distorted view of like the physical world that science is trying to look at, right? Again, the whole big paradigm itself is, has problematic assumptions even about the physical world. We discussed that before. And I think you mentioned before utilitarianism, right? You mentioned that word as the dominant ethical theory of the contemporary age is utilitarianism. This goes back to John Stuart Mill, Jeremy Bentham before him, but mostly Mill's, iteration of it. The idea is that, okay, things are good or bad based on whether they bring about benefit or harm. Now, there's some truth to this, and it is intuitive. But again, that's one aspect of morality. It's not the whole aspect. It's not the entirety of it. Secondly, the bigger question is, and this is where the worldview assumptions come into play, what counts as benefit and harm, right? Well, that depends on your view of what the human being is. If you believe that human beings are primarily or exclusively physical creatures and who are here to maximize personal autonomy and freedom, then you are going to think that certain things are harmful and not harmful based on those assumptions. But if someone says, well, I'm going to do a harm-benefit calculation, but I have very different assumptions about what the human being is, what human interests are, what different aspects exist in us, then I might have a very different calculation of what's harmful or beneficial. Because look, in the modern world, if it's based on mostly like a materialistic view, then the harms and benefits are going to be primarily material, measurable ones. So why is it like in the West, I don't know how it is in India, but in the West over the last 30, 40 years, they've basically declared a war on smoking. Okay. When I was growing up in the like late 70s, early 80s, people smoked everywhere, like in restaurants, in like elevators, buses, like smoke was everywhere. And then they started restricting it. Why? Because lung cancer and all of this stuff, they had like empirical evidence, here are the harms. So they started restricting it. Now there's like a non-smoking section in the restaurant. Now the whole restaurant is non-smoking and there's a smoking section. Now you have to smoke outside. Now you have to smoke 50 feet away from the door. All of this stuff. So this is a restriction on freedom, but people accept it because they say this is bringing about the better good, like physical health. That's fine. Like physical health is important. And, the majority of Muslim scholars say that smoking is haram. So this is fine. We would agree with this, right? But what about other kinds of harm? Why was it up until the late 1960s, things like pornography were basically banned in the West? And, they knew that, okay, this is a spiritual harm. It's a moral harm. It's undercutting the moral fiber of society. It's poking its finger at like a very sacred norm, which is that sex should be kept within marriage. Pornography is like very obscene in that environment. And so it was legally forbidden. And then the late 60s, in the time of the sexual revolution, they said, no, all of this is nonsense. This is just prudery. This is just like religious, old-fashioned, blah, blah, blah. And all of this stuff needs to be made, permissible and legal, right? And you say, well, wait a minute, but what about the moral harms that are being caused? What about the harm to the soul of seeing these types of things? What about the fact that people will be more inclined maybe to engage in, illicit sexual behavior when it's all around them? And they're more stimulated and there's no more taboo against it or no more sense of like shame or hayat, right? And all of that, well, they didn't care about because they were running on a paradigm which said, well, we live in a material universe. If you can't show me the material harms of it, okay, which you can, there's like venereal disease, there's pregnancy. I mean, I can show you also right? But if they'll say, if you can't show us that, don't talk to us about spiritual and moral harms. Those are immaterial things. Those are very contested. Those are very subjective, right? We can't make proper laws in public society that that cater to those types of things because those aren't real. Why? Because the only thing that's real is like show it to me
Yeah.
under a microscope. Show me the figures. Give me the statistics. That's what it means to have a materialistic worldview.